My name did not even appear on the invitation, yet here you all are. It's a mystery. I'm Tim Castano, and I serve as the president of New Start, New Jersey, the organization we proudly launched this morning with Phil and Tammy Murphy, our advisory board, and each of you. Thank you for being here. Today begins our ongoing engagement with New Jersey and all those interested in its future. We invite you to please visit our website, nsnj.org. Please encourage others to as well. We aim to create a dynamic experience for those interested in the initiatives and ideas that will improve our economy and enhance our quality of life. You'll see there are first looks at free community college as well as export promotion, with other issues slated for review in the upcoming weeks. On a larger scale, on January 21st, we're going to be releasing a report with the Center for American Progress on policies to strengthen the middle class in New Jersey, and that'll be held at the John J. Holdridge Center for Workforce Development at Rutgers University. And we hope to see all of you there. That's actually a smaller venue, so you'll have to work out among yourselves who gets to go, but we'll make it work, don't worry. New Jersey houses many assets, as we all know, and we have the good fortune to be at one right now, one of our finest resources, the New Jersey Institute of Technology. From the quality of its scholarship to the innovation with industry, and of course the outstanding student body, NJIT is really the best we have to offer. So thank you very much to everyone who made this possible, especially Dr. Ross, everyone. But now it is my privilege to introduce the president of NJIT, President Joel.
Good morning and welcome to the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Couldn't help but notice some of our students sitting here in the assembly, and we haven't seen them in these many jackets and looking this good with ties since our last career fair or graduation. So thank you all for being here with us today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the State Science and Technology University to launch this very important venture, which is intended to develop our economy and therefore benefit the people of New Jersey. Called New Start, New Jersey, the new organization was recently established by its distinguished chairman, Philip D. Murphy, the former United States ambassador to Germany. Also allow me to introduce some other distinguished guests that I noticed we happen to have here today. Gentlemen, I had the opportunity to work with for 8 years as an assistant commissioner for education, a dear friend of NJIT, Governor Tom Kane. And somebody we had the pleasure of following as he was exiting Trenton, Governor Brendan Byrne. Good morning. And his first lady and a frequent visitor to our campus, Ruthie Byrne. Good morning. And talking about first ladies, the one I live with, Dr. Diane Bloom. Good morning. I'm going to call some other names, not having seen everyone here, in case they are. Oh, there's Rush. Rush, you're up first. Good morning, Rush Holt. Congressman Rush Holt. And his soon-to-be successor, Bonnie Watson Coleman. A dear friend of the university, Senator Loretta Weinberg, Senator. I haven't seen Congressman Kane yet. Is he here? No. Assemblyman Joe Bryan, you're in the audience. Oh, there he is. Assemblyman, please. Assemblywoman Valerie Huddle. Assemblywoman Sheila Oliver. Not yet. Barbara Bono. I saw Gordon McGinnis, former Senator McGinnis, I saw him in the audience too as well. Commissioner Gene Fox, Board of Public Utilities. Chairman of the New Jersey Democratic Party, John Curry. His former Ambassador Clay Contantino, former Ambassador Contantino. Thank you. Leon Botstein, Board President, College. Thank you, Leon. Colleague of mine of the County College of Morris, Ed York. Ed, you here, President York. Good morning. Chris Dagger. Chris, are you here? Mayor Janice Kovich, Clinton, New Jersey. And we have the honor of having the mayor of Hillside working with us here at NJIT, Angela Garrettson. And Councilman Michael DuPont from Red Bank, New Jersey. Neighboring town of mine. Yeah, Mike, okay. So thank you all the other very distinguished people who are here with us this morning as well. Allow me to talk a couple minutes about what I've learned in an earlier meeting about New Start, New Jersey. It is based on the principle of economic growth. It is a linchpin that is intended to drive middle-class prosperity and allow for necessary investments in education, infrastructure, and innovation. Without investment, you don't grow. It must be about the top line as well as the bottom line. We know from basic economics and our experience of centuries now that we cannot disinvest and expect to grow and to prosper. We must invest. And in part, clearly that is the role of our government, whether at the local level, the state level, or at the federal level. According to Ambassador Murphy, the aim is to activate the job-creating, commerce-generating practices that will position New Jersey and its people for a better economic future. Consider the assets of our city. We have ports, we have airports, we have more scientists and experts in technology per capita in this state than any state in the nation. And look at the industry that gets attracted here on a daily, weekly, and annual basis and has chosen to stay in the great state of New Jersey. So we have all of the ingredients as a growth state, as a state with great potential, and again, as I look at our students, they are it. Among the initiatives that are being spotlighted for consideration is the generation of venture capital for startup companies, the promotion of technical education, and increased support for entrepreneurs, to name just a few. And we must define technical education to be inclusive of low-tech and high-tech. And I won't go on about that, but if we continue to pay attention about career institutes of technology, I think that is the continual workforce we must have in this city, in the state, and in the nation. If you look at the Department of Labor website today, I guarantee you there are over 800 jobs that are going unfilled, and they are both the low-tech and the high-tech jobs, and it's all about STEM education. And as many of you already know, these are the themes with which NJIT is indeed closely associated and very familiar. As one of the nation's leading public universities, NJIT prepares students to be leaders in the technology-enriched economy of the 21st century. We have a four-part mission. Most universities have a three mission. We all educate, we all do research, and we do an abundance of community service. But since about 1969, this university has had in its mission statement economic development. We know that well over 25% of the engineers in this state are the alumni, and alumni of this university. NJIT is now the largest engineering school in the state of New Jersey. I invite you to explore the vast array of what NJIT has to offer at believe materials have been left at your place, and hopefully you'll be a little more informed about this treasure here in the state of New Jersey. It just touches on the surface. We have a record enrollment this year of over 10,500 students. Students and their parents are very smart. They know where the jobs are. 90% of the students who graduate are employed in the professions of their choice. 90%. It's almost triple the national average of most careers. They're employed within 1 year of their graduation. You may have noticed last year NJIT was ranked #1 in the nation. Two simple metrics. What did you pay for your 4 years, and what was your starting salary? And it was the NJIT that was ranked first. I happened to be meeting with the president of Princeton that day, and that little note dropped out of my portfolio. They were #8. Still a good place to live. So we're doing $110 million in applied research. We incubate 90 companies just a block and a half back from here. They're doing about $85 million in work, and they employ about 300 of our students. This past year, April of 22nd, we launched something called the New Jersey Innovation Institute. It's a simple portal to work with government, nonprofits, and industry. And we're in business, Don, since April 22nd. Don Sebastian is the president of NJII, and we've brought about $15 million in new research and contracts to this campus and to this state since April 22nd through NJII. These are just some of the many reasons why we are so pleased today to welcome today's launch here at NJIT of New Start, New Jersey, and Ambassador Murphy and his wife Tammy. We clearly share a common perspective as to what makes prosperity possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Good morning. My name is Tammy Murphy, and I thank you for joining us as we begin New Start, New Jersey. New Jersey is our home. We chose New Jersey. It's where we raised our children. We have all heard stories and see the struggles of families throughout the state. And the statistics tell the bigger story. New Jersey needs a new start. Phil and I love New Jersey. We've been very proud to raise our children here. Again, it's home. New Jersey is a special place, a place we need to protect. Our family is better because of the strengths of the Garden State. There should be no limit to what New Jersey can accomplish. We decided that we would do everything in our power to help. The result is New Start, New Jersey. This is truly a team effort. We have the support and participation of incredible leaders on our advisory board. You will hear from Anna Diaz-White, Cornell Brooks, and Carl Van Horn. I would also like to recognize our other advisory board members with us today. Ginny Bauer, the business executive and former Commerce Secretary. Kevin Ryan, the president and CEO of Covenant House International. Gloria Bonilla Santiago, Board of Governors, Distinguished Service Professors at Rutgers and the board chair of Leap Academy. And Jean Fox, the former president of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Two other members, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Mike Blumenthal and Energy Executive Kathy Ellis, could not be here today. My deepest thanks to each of you and everyone here today. Together, New Start New Jersey will make a difference. Now I welcome our chairman, a man I know better than anyone. A man with vision, a man who gets things done, a man who cares and who serves. The principle of service is one we live, and one we've ingrained in each of our 4 children. At its core, New Start New Jersey is about service, serving New Jersey's middle class. Today, together, we launch New Start New Jersey. Please welcome a great father, husband, Little League coach, and the chairman of New Start New Jersey, Phil Murphy.
If you came here today looking for any baseball tips, you're going to be sorely disappointed. For those of you who don't yet know Tammy, as you get to know her, you will ask the question that our 4 children ask all the time. What is she doing with him? Tim Costello, we're very lucky to have you as our president. My buddy from Monmouth Beach, Joel Bloom, and Mrs. Bloom, it's an honor to be at NJIT today. It's a real treat. I'm looking around and I'm catching Bruce Gordon just to pick him out of the lineup. I think there's something I can say about every one of you, but I'm just going to pick Bruce by example. It's great to have you here, buddy, with Tawana and so many friends. It means a lot to us. And Joel, I have to say in particular, it's great to have so many of your students here today. Let's give a big shout out to the students. Again, at the risk of leaving folks off, 2 folks at that end of the front row deserve enormous acknowledgement. One is outgoing Congressman Rush Holt. The other is the first African American woman ever elected to the House of Representatives in the state of New Jersey, Bonnie Washington. And we're trying to put the group together today, and at its core, I reached out to 3 mentors / role models who I wanted to have here today, and I batted 2 for 3. The guy who couldn't be here today is my dear friend, Paul Volcker, who I've bonded with over the past, particularly 5 years, and everything from transparency and public reporting on state budgets to how you reform Wall Street and get Wall Street in the place it needs to be. Bill Glasgow, I think, is here today. You here? I don't know where you are. In any event, Paul, in absentia, has been an extraordinary mentor of mine. But 2 guys made it. Former Governor Brendan Byrd, who's here with Ruthie. It's a real honor that you would make it here, sir. You're a role model. And if I say anything out of line, please don't hit me with that thing. And the other, of course, is your seatmate, Governor Tom Kean. But we're having an annual meal summit for about the past dozen years, where we talk about everything from what do we need to do in New Jersey, all the way to national security and everything else in between. So it's a great honor to have you gentlemen, Mrs. Byrne, here today with us. I have to, before I address the business of the day, I have to reach back, if you will permit me, into my prior life for 2 observations. We set this room up yesterday, November 9th. We're here today on November 10th. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that yesterday was the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that's relevant for all of us right here and right now. Because the fall of the wall proved that without a shot being fired, something that seemed permanent, cement, that wouldn't go away, actually did go away. And so for places like Syria, Middle East peace, the 2 Koreas, that notion is as relevant today as it was in 1989. It's also an example where for all of the great leaders in this room and around the country and around the world who managed from the top, most lasting change in the world comes from the streets. And the people of East Germany proved that 25 years ago yesterday. I think it's the most important geopolitical development of the past 75 years. Unfortunately, on November 9th and 10th, 76 years ago today, was Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. The coordinated, systematic pogroms around Germany and Austria. Almost 100 Jews were murdered. 30,000 Jews were deported to concentration camps, most of whom never came out alive. 1,000 synagogues were burned 76 years ago today. 7,000 businesses were disrupted or burned. And so, as we always say, for that more sobering anniversary, let us never forget. And now to the business of today. I am a firm believer that New Jersey's society and economy are only as strong as our middle class. And that's why when I look at New Jersey today, I believe the formula for getting our economy back on track is clear. To start with the middle class and build out. I know this works because I've lived it. I've been fortunate in my life. Growing up, we were middle class on a good day. I worked hard and I got lucky. And when I look back on where I started as a working class kid outside of Boston, I know I didn't get here by myself. I didn't have the advantages that our 4 kids have, frankly. But I had the great fortune to grow up in a community that judged itself on whether families like mine could make ends meet and give their kids a fair shot at a better life. There were people out there fighting for the middle-class families. That willingness to fight for middle-class families is what once made New Jersey great, America great. And it's exactly what we're missing today. Everybody knows we should be doing better. As Tammy said, we've seen and heard the struggles of middle-class families. Anybody can cite the statistics. But the real story is underneath the statistics and headlines. It's in the sacrifices and diminished expectations that are becoming a fact of life for New Jersey's middle class. That's the trend we need to reverse. We need to get back to the time when New Jersey promised a better life for everyone willing to work for it, a life of security and peace of mind, and the realistic expectation that our children's quality of life would be better than our own. New Start New Jersey was created to lead the search for the kind of policy solutions that can restore the middle class to its rightful place at the center of this state's life. To make the middle class stronger, so people who aspire to be in it can work their way in, and for those already in the middle class, it can be rewarded with greater stability and security. We decided that the first step had to be listening to the voices of New Jerseyans to understand their experience, their hopes, and the obstacles to a better life. 3 weeks ago, New Start New Jersey conducted a survey of many hundreds of New Jerseyans. We thought we'd start off the conversation today with a brief discussion of the results and what they say about the middle class life today. We don't want to number you to death, believe me, but as Daniel Patrick Moynihan, one of my heroes, famously observed, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts. So let's look at some of the facts we've learned. And our hope is that the results shock our state into action, and they should. The first thing that's critical to say is that our poll confirms that New Jersey is a middle-class state. 3 out of every 4 people identify with the middle class in our state, and they're struggling. Among those who identify as middle class, 2/3 are saying they're just getting by. About half say it's harder to make ends meet than it was a year ago, and that they're making sacrifices just to make ends meet. And you should also know that when you slice up the definition of middle class and look specifically at the so-called, at folks who identify themselves in the lower middle class, it's not just half of the folks who are cutting back, but nearly 3 in 4 said they need to cut back just to make ends meet. It's no wonder then that we see our middle class struggling. Overwhelmingly, folks in the middle class say that it's getting weaker and that the middle class is less financially secure than it was a generation ago. And that last point's important. Many people who talk about the middle class haven't yet understood the significance of that point today. For some time, people have discussed how this generation of parents could be the first to see its children fare worse than they have. But the pain, it turns out, isn't a generation away. It's happening right now. A majority of New Jerseyans already believe that their generation's quality of life is worse than that of their parents. That's happening already. Only among seniors is it common to believe that you've done better than your parents. And folks expect the trend to continue. 65% of New Jerseyans believe that their children will grow up worse off than they did. What we're seeing is, to sum it up, an erosion erosion of the pillars of middle-class life. Now, on this, New Jerseyans share a broad consensus on what a middle-class life should look like. When we ask folks to rate a list of factors on how necessary each is to their personal idea, their perception of what it means to live a middle-class life, the factors most commonly cited as necessary won't surprise you. A secure retirement, not needing to worry about the cost of essentials, and a secure job, all of which serve to reassure families from their uncertainty about their economic future. However, while New Jerseyans see these contemporary hallmarks of middle-class life as necessary, they also see them as slipping out of reach. When we asked how well those same factors describe them currently and personally, not just their perception of what it should be, but how it applies to them, a striking gap emerged between what middle-class life should be like and what citizens actually see in their own lives. And you can look at the yawning gap, as can I, between the perception of middle class and the reality for these individuals. I said to Tammy, it's as though they're watching the rerun of a movie that they used to be in. Or as someone said to me the other day, trying to stay in the middle class is like running in tar. One of the more striking data points comes from what's missing from the list of middle class pillars. In other words, when we ask folks what should be in an ideal middle class, this was missing. Namely, the ability to afford a college education for your children. A generation ago, I believe that most of us would have said being able to send your kid to college was part of a middle class life. But today, even the aspiration of sending their kids to college doesn't make the cut. Never mind the sad reality of how you can afford it. Again, it probably goes without saying, for those in the lower middle class, the story is even tougher. The hallmarks of middle class life are drifting out of reach for more families than ever before. Something needs to be done to reverse course. In the weeks ahead, we're going to be releasing more data from this poll, specifically what New Jerseyans say these trends mean for the state as a whole and what they see as the way forward. We hope very much that their voices drive this conversation toward real solutions. Thankfully, there's also positive news in this poll. For me, the most encouraging numbers come from the consensus of how our state can move forward. For instance, there's big agreement that a strong middle class is the key to a growing economy. That's statement. Over 90% of New Jerseyans agree with the statement that without a strong middle class, there's no way that New Jersey can have a strong economy in the years ahead. Over 80% agree with the statement, we need to build an economy from the middle class out. And I view all of those as resoundingly pieces of good news. That work can begin here. By no means do we have all or even most of the answers. But thanks to all of you, we have the collective will to begin addressing the problems. I am an optimist by nature, and I love this state. New Start New Jersey will take a glass half full approach in developing a comprehensive strategy to rebuild the middle class. Our afflictions are man-made, and so are the answers. We all recognize that despite our struggles, New Jersey has extraordinary resources and holds remarkable advantages. We have institutions like NJIT. We have dynamic industries. We are blessed with an indispensable location that no amount of money could buy. Above all, we have exceptional citizens who have skill, a spirit, and a fight, particularly on behalf of their kids, that no people can match. It's time to maximize these assets. It is time for a new start. We have with us this morning experts and persons of enormous passions from a cross-section of fields directly involved in the issues confronting New Jersey's middle class, including folks from foundations, social service organizations, national advocacy entities, think tanks, and academia. Before I ask them to join me on stage, I'd like to introduce them, if I may. First, we have my dear friend, the chairman and founder of the John Bon Jovi Soul Foundation, John Bon Jovi. He is here, by the way, with his life partner, Mrs. Bon Jovi, Dorothea. Cornell Brooks is literally walking from the train station. Is Cornell here? Cornell, buddy. Great to have you. Cornell and I met when he was running the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and he is today with us as the president and chief executive officer of one of America's great organizations and badges of honor, the NAACP. Great to have you tonight. We have before me an old friend, Neera Tanden, the president of what I believe is the Tiffany standard of think tanks, the Center for American Progress. Neera, great to have you here. We have Anna Diaz-White, who is here as the executive director of 180 Turning Lives Around, which is an organization that is near and dear to our heart. It deals with victims of domestic violence and runs an extraordinary teen helpline in the state of New Jersey. Anna, great to have you. And last but not least, batting fifth, the distinguished professor at Rutgers University and the director of the John J. Helbert Center for Workforce Development, my friend Carl Van Horn. As they say, come on down, folks. Anna. Good morning. Down on the right way. Carl, you're right here. Big guy. Good. Big lift, I know. So here we go. Make sure I get my watch on me so we don't overstay our welcome with folks, which is always the challenge. I mentioned, Carl, I don't want to ask you a question about this, but I mentioned as part of your title, you run the Helbert Center. And Tammy and I and Tim Castano are bouncing around the state of New Jersey, trying to meet as many people as possible to understand their view of what we need to do to get things right. And I have to say that both John Helbert and Clement Price were on the list for me to try to see, and we never got there. So John Helbert, particularly for what he did in New Brunswick, and Clement for what he did in Newark, two giants who had left the stage. Again, it's great to have all of you here. What a lineup, huh? One more time for these folks. This is I don't know about you, but this is not for Tammy and me a typical Monday morning. We don't normally do these things at NJIT, but we made an exception for all today. Neera, can I start with you?
Sure.
May I? As I said, you run one of the nation's foremost think tank so-called organizations. You've read a little bit about our poll. You've heard me go through the tough facts today. How unique, how singular is the experience of the middle class in New Jersey relative to what you're seeing around the country?
So the poll was fascinating because I think most people think of New Jersey doing better than other states, has a higher average income. But if you look at the numbers more deeply, what they show is that the New Jersey economy, much like the country, the economy is polarizing. So there's, over the last 10 years, we've seen a growth of people at the top and at the bottom, and a real squeeze in the middle. And I think that's belied by the numbers that you see that you have yourself, which is people feel like they're running in place. What that means is, like, when you look at the numbers and the facts for the country, wages are pretty stagnant, costs are going up. We just did a report at CAP a few weeks ago on the middle class piece, and as a country, we see that for prototype wages have stayed flat for the couple's family, the couple's income has stayed flat for the last 10, 12 years, and costs have risen, healthcare costs, childcare costs, those daily essentials, but also long-term costs, retirement security. So I think that's a conundrum for the country, and what's fascinating about New Jersey is that you're absolutely right, great resources, but also really high costs that are squeezing the middle class at a time where wages are stuck as well. So it really points to what we need as a country and in states is policies that will address rising wages, getting wages up, and the kind of squeeze costs that families are facing.
You worked in both the Clinton and the Obama administrations, and I used to way back associate you first and foremost with healthcare. But you obviously, you cover the whole range of domestic policy. Middle class specific, how do you see the particular concerns, strains of healthcare playing into this struggle?
So we've seen that at a national level, even though healthcare costs are stagnating for the country writ large, consumers are actually paying more for healthcare. So they feel that the costs have gone up because they have higher out-of-pocket costs, deductibles, other things have gone up. So I think that's really the next avenue for policy, how to make sure that we're reducing healthcare costs for everyone as a country, but also that consumers are really feeling it. And I think that's a very important area. If, again, looking at the national averages, a sort of typical middle class family, the cost they pay for healthcare has gone up $2,000 over the last 10 years, which is a pretty big bite out of it. And to make one additional point, why this matters for economic growth, we see that families just have less disposable income. So so they have less money to buy goods and buy from their local stores, et cetera. And that's the real problem. In the United States, most of our economy grows by consumers buying goods, and when they don't have the resources, that's a drag for communities, for states, for New Jersey and the country.
And that's a very powerful point. It's sort of a double whammy. You've not only got the challenges as we articulated within the middle class, you've got the impact that this has on the overall economy and society, where you've got less buying power, essentially, less confidence in consumption, etc. Anna, can I go all the way down to you? You have essentially two types of clients. You've got victims of domestic violence and their families, and this is an organization, I think it was the first federally funded women's shelter in the United States. It's an extraordinary organization. Again, associated with all these people, their organization, shameless commercial, Center for American Progress on my left, 180 turning lives around, down at the end of the line. You've got victims of domestic violence, which is the core of the organization, and you've got alongside of it the teen helpline that we started way back and had a lot of assistance from John and Dorothy on that, which is now very successful, non-stigmatized. So it's not a drug line or an alcohol line or a suicide line. You call for any reason, from I'm having trouble with my math homework all the way up to I'm going to kill myself. How do you see these stresses that we're talking about impacting through the lens of your organization through either of those communities of clients?
Well, I have to say, for social services in general, they are the bellwether for what's happening in the economy. So we're the first place that people often turn to when there's economic stressors. And economic stressors, at least in my field, tend to exacerbate family tensions, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and neglect. And so we see our numbers going up. And then as the bellwether, we're also the bellwether for the part of the economy that's helping to fund our services. So we see the funding going down to support the services at the very time when stressors, et cetera, are increasing the number of clients coming forward. And a concrete example of that, Phil, is that our domestic violence shelter in the last 5 years, we've had to turn away as many families as we've served because more families have been coming forward and we haven't had the room to accommodate them. So we see that. In terms of the helpline for kids, we're seeing more calls from kids, and this is a statewide helpline called Second Floor. More calls from kids with heavier, deeper, bigger problems than ever before. And so if you go to the website, secondfloor.org, you're going to see web posts from kids that are heartbreaking when you read the kinds of issues that they're having, family problems, family stressors, greater alcoholism, substance abuse in the family, stress in terms of even just being able to make ends meet and the effects of that on the family and the kids. So it's pretty widespread.
When you go back to your shelter comment about people getting turned away, where do they go?
Well, we try to put them in other shelters in other parts of the state. That's kind of our first thing to do. But often, if the person is working in our county, for example, in Monmouth County, it's really not great if you find space in a shelter in Cape May County, because that's going to be a 2-hour commute, and that's not going to work for them, for their child care, for their schooling, etc. So it's really not great. Some families end up doubling up with other families, or some families, we kind of lose track of what happened.
And if we turn the clock back, and we were having this conversation magically back in, say, 2000, what would be a good year? 2007, so before the Great Recession. How would your comments have been different then?
Well, first of all, our numbers were more manageable in terms of the number of families coming forward. And in terms of our organization's ability to meet the demand for service, it was greater because our funding was greater. And that's funding, not only government funding, but our budget has about 40% of donor support. So when our donors aren't doing well, we're not doing well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You've done, this is a good point, a good moment to point out that your organization has done well with administrations on both sides of the aisle in New Jersey, to your credit and to the credit of those administrations. It's also worth pointing out that today is completely about policy. Ours is a 501c4 organization, so this is all about policy, and we're trying to vacuum up ideas from wherever we can find them. So we look, Tim and I go as far afield as finding ideas that are working. So far, we've found some interesting things that work in Oregon, Tennessee, and Maryland. 3 very different states, very different impulses, but 3 states that have got some really cool things going on that we're hopefully, frankly, to use a diplomatic phrase, which we're trying to rip off. And Carl, over to you, buddy. A couple of things. You wrote, it's worth reminding everyone, you're the author of a piece of work which summarizes a lot of what we're talking about today. It's called Working Scared, which summarizes it. You also at the Heldridge Center released a national survey a couple of months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, Unhappy, Worried, and Pessimistic Americans in the Aftermath of the Great Recession. And I read that survey. Frankly, we might have been able to save time on our own survey because we came up with a lot of common ground. Any particular things you heard today that resonate for you in your work? And maybe another one for you. How do we get into this fix?
It does resonate with our work, and our studies are national surveys, right? And we've been tracking the American workforce really since 1997. And what was interesting then, when we first started, was how anxious people were about their jobs at that point. And a lot of the problems result from volatility in the labor market, uncertainty, and global competition and rapid technological change. Then comes the Great Recession, the worst recession in anybody's lifetime here, except for a very small number of people, Governor Byrne perhaps. And it makes everything worse. And I think it's very important to understand as people try to grapple, how do you get out of this, to finding from our survey that found that 1 in 5 Americans lost a job during the recession. 1 in 5. And 80% of Americans, it was someone in their family or a close personal friend. This was not a hypothetical experience. It was not just an academic exercise. It was a horrific trauma. And to get back from that is going to take, and is taking, a long period of time. What was striking to me was in the survey we just did, again, we track every year, people felt more pessimistic, even though the unemployment rate had got down 2%, their been 10 million jobs created in this country. And why? Why are they still pessimistic? Partly what Mira said, their wages aren't going up, so this is a wage increase-less economy. But also because the devastation was so great. Most people lost huge amounts in their assets and their savings if they had any. And then again, they experience when they get back in the labor force, many of them, lower wages or temporary jobs. In fact, there's about 8 million people today who have a job part-time who want a full-time job. And so when we look at New Jersey, frankly, we've got, unfortunately, a lot of the same story. We have a higher unemployment rate than many states. And amongst the long-term unemployed, those people who've been unemployed for more than 6 months, we have one of the highest. So that's the bad news, which is it's a tough experience, and we've got a long way to recover, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the solutions as we talk about.
Carl, your national sense, is there any particular outlier that when you looked at the national scene, you read a little bit about the poll, is there any singular data point in there or trend that you found particularly anomalous with the work you've done nationally?
Well, I think part of it is what Mira also referred to, which is we are a high per capita income state. So we're better off than a lot of other states in the fundamentals. As you said, we have the transportation, location, we have a very highly educated workforce by comparison. But yet, you still find that level of pessimism here. And of course, part of it is people's expectations and then what actually happens are not consistent.
Yeah. Amen. You raise a point which we always have to caution ourselves on in the state. The average experience looks really impressive in New Jersey, measured across a whole range of questions. Public education would be one example. But the dispersion of experience, I think statistically, is as wide here as it is anywhere in the country. So if you just stop looking at that sort of two-dimensional cut at the headline, you miss a lot of the real underpinning reality that you face. Thank you for that. John, your foundation exists, and I quote, to counter the forces that drive people into economic despair. And you and Dorothea and your efforts focus on things in particular like food, shelter. A lot of the work that Kevin does at Covenant has a similar impulse. In hearing the sort of downbeat attitude expressed by the majority of our state citizens, as I articulated, what resonates most loudly for you as it relates to your work? And by the way, it's great having you here today. I suspect more than a few of you were here because of this man. Let's just get that out of the table. I know I am.
I appreciate that. Our work has, our foundation's work began in housing, and it expanded itself into our restaurant, which is the Soul Kitchen in Red Bank. Most notably, in the 5 years since we began the operation, I've seen an increase in the at-need population. And when you consider that there's 46 million Americans who are going hungry, that have food insecurities, the basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, these are things that we at our foundation believe that we don't need a scientist to find that cure. And this is how we got more and more involved in that. But statistically speaking, there were a few things that were noticeable to me. That the federal poverty level for a family of four is approximately $24,000. But in Monmouth County, where we're from, the real cost of living is more like $74,000. So for the at-need population that have the opportunity to get the safety nets at $24,000 to $25,000, which is an absurd, low number. And then the gap between 24 and 74, the people are just as in need, but ultimately don't qualify.
Right.
So that's very difficult. And these are the people that we find that we're serving more and more every day. There's also an increase in veterans who are looking for food and shelter. Our senior community who are in need of food, and single parents.
Right.
So when we created the restaurant in 09, after the economic downturn, We began it in a church basement. We went from there into a soup kitchen with lunch break, which extended their seventh day when they were closed to us. And now we're in a retail spot. And it's been humbling, but also very fulfilling, because our at-need population is coming and taking part in volunteering. And our mission was always to empower that population. We have had so many people who have come and said, I was the one who would donate to a restaurant like this, now I'm the one who is eating. And in Monmouth County, New Jersey, that is humbling, and it's unacceptable. And it's also something, as I stated, we don't need a scientist to find the cure. Sweat and money and getting the message out, we can make a difference.
I'd say this place, again, shameless commercials. I didn't do Carl, John J. Halbert Center at Rutgers. The Soul Kitchen, first of all, the whole foundation is extraordinary. But the Soul Kitchen, which is right in our backyard, a mile away, is a really exceptional model. I forget who gave this idea.
We were watching the news. When we built houses, we built 450 individual units of housing, whether it's in an apartment. We were the lead funder on the JBJ Soul Homes here in Newark. When I opened the Prudential Center, I agreed to open the Prudential for 10 nights if I could build something here in Newark with the province. So with the help at the time of Mayor Booker, some tax abatements, we built the JBJ Soul Homes, a 50-unit mixed usage of affordable housing here, Camden, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, all the way to Los Angeles and back. But when the economic downturn happened and the tax abatements were drying up and there was a glut of foreclosures, Dorothea and I were watching the national news one night, and Brian Williams in a Make a Difference segment, when it just began, and if you remember, a 3-minute positive segment in a rather negative news, and news cycle, was really refreshing. And one day he spoke of a restaurant that was feeding people in need, where it was a for-profit restaurant, but we would provide you in this restaurant a model where you could get nutritious food for free. And Dorothea said, this is obviously the next phase of the foundation, which we began and created this model, which is all about empowering people, having them come if they can afford to come. There are no prices on our menus. You come and you donate. Minimum required donation. If you leave that, you pay for your meal. Should you choose to pay it forward and maybe leave $20, you have witnessed change. If you cannot afford and you participate in our restaurant, volunteerism is underlined in our restaurant. We are empowering individuals. You could have a 12-year-old, and I'll tell you a quick anecdote. A 12-year-old boy came in looking to help out. He swept the floors, we gave him a certificate, came back and he fed his family of 5. He was 12. He came in with such pride, and he sat there with his mom and his dad and his family. He says, I paid for the meal because he volunteered. We now have about a 50-50 population that come into our Soul Kitchen and are both those in need and those who are helping us to pay.
I love that. One more for you before we move. This goes back to you founded this in 2006, is that right? Foundation? 2005. Have you moved into areas that you weren't anticipating if we were to roll the clock back 8 or 9 years ago?
Yes, I think it's a matter of experience. We have, and nobody would have anticipated Superstorm Sandy. Comes in, devastates communities of the middle class that you're speaking of today. People who were making ends meet, however, but they were making ends meet. They were paying their bills, they were paying the mortgage. Complete communities devastated. Many people have yet to come back from Superstorm Sandy. That's one part of our population, and we're creating a second kitchen to pop up in Union Beach, for instance, that will begin the first of the year. Another part of our population, unbeknownst to us, is, as John stated, an after effect of the economic downturn. There are people who had steady income, career path, maybe 20, 30 years down that career path. Those jobs were lost. They were not only unemployed, but perhaps unemployable, had to go and seek a profession that they were unfamiliar with, just to look to make ends meet. Compounded by the fact that They're competing with a younger workforce that are trained in that field at a much lower pay rate because of the entry level positions that they were more readily available. They had to compromise their lifestyles, which were not exaggerated to begin with. So that, and then our third element, our already defined in-need population, keeps the restaurant very busy.
It hasn't happened for all, in some cases for all the wrong reasons. But the model is extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. So shameless promotion. Check it out for yourself. And the opportunity to pay forward for others is there for all of us. Cornell Brooks, great to have you, buddy, coming in from Mississippi, as I recall. So Cornell and I met in this very town for the first time, running the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, which did and does and will continue to do great things in the state. And as luck would have it, in the middle of our discussions about New Start New Jersey, Cornell was appointed the president and chief executive officer of the NAACP. I might add, I picked up Bruce earlier, a position that Bruce held not too long ago. It's great to have you here. Cornell, a question similar to the one that I asked Mira to start things off. You've got a good sense of New Jersey, and you've now got an early sense of what life looks like around the country. To what extent, when you hear about this poll, when you get a sense of the working class families in the state, is that consistent with what you're seeing around the country? Is it anomalous? Is it unique? And again, great to have you.
Phil, it's good to be here. Good to see you again. The work that I did at the Institute for Social Justice, which yet it informs and inspires the work that I do at the NAACP, what's clear in this discussion and what's clear with the survey is that the survey reflects attitudinally what is empirically the case for New Jersey and the entire country. So to the extent that in New Jersey you have people who have full-time aspirations, full-time ambition, who are relegated to part-time work, to the extent that you have middle-class New Jerseyans who are subject to, I would call working-class taxes. That is to say, people who are subject to collateral sanctions, who have minor criminal histories, and who find that they cannot viably compete for work. To the extent that you have middle-class New Jerseyans, or working-class New Jerseyans, who live in communities where you have people who have aspirations, but they are not able to get to the jobs that can make a difference in their lives, or where they're not trained and well-equipped for those jobs. That is not only a challenge for New Jersey, it's a challenge for the country. And what I think is distinctive about New Jersey is the fact that we have such a high cost of living, right? In terms of housing, in terms of healthcare, and in terms of food. I see a scholar, Stephanie Halpern, who's here, who did a wonderful study entitled Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed, which is just another way of saying working, but catching hell.
It's so, I didn't know that was you. It's so good to meet you. I've read all your stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks to this guy. Cornell got me onto this about 6 months ago, and I read that big, thick report you put out. This is an important, I'd love you to give a little bit more on this, Cornell. This is a really important notion.
Well, it's the notion that you have people who are working all across New Jersey, not merely concentrated in Camden, Newark, or places that we think are economically challenged, who find themselves hanging on to the ragged edge, if you will, of sustenance. And what this report essentially says is that you can work, you can do all the right things, but because it is so expensive to live here, you can find yourself not quite making it. And the report is entitled Alice, which is descriptive of the fact that there are many women as well as men who find themselves in that predicament. And that is true here in New Jersey, but it is also true across the country.
So this is a little bit of version of John's comment that was like $24,000 and you're living in a $75,000 world. Even if you're running as fast as you can, you're not going to get there. This is a real, again, it's ALICE, that's the acronym. Asset limited, income constrained, but employed. So these are people who have jobs. And it's, in my memory, it's a United Way and Rutgers joint effort. Do you mind shouting out a website? Again, the opportunity for shameless self-promotion of your work, please.
Great. So you can just look up United Way Alice, and you can find the report for New Jersey.
Cornell, other than New Jersey's a lot more expensive to live in than you see around in most states around the country, anything else strike you that's unique or anomalous about our experience relative to your, how many months have you been in the seat?
3 months, but I've traveled much of the country in that time.
You're not traveling much, right?
Quite a bit.
I knew this from Bruce's life. That job, you're on the road. So
On the road.
it's a real treat that you're here today. Anything else strike you that's unique or anomalous about New Jersey?
I wouldn't say it's so much unique, but I would say that in the same way across the country, there's tremendous promise and potential. I believe that to be the case here in New Jersey, except more so. To the extent that we have some real hard assets here, we had a history, a backdrop, an expectation. When you look at the survey, there's a sense that people have here that we once were well on the path toward the American dream for New Jerseyans, that we've somehow drifted from the path. To me, that represents a sense of historical optimism, if you will, looking backward and yet sensing the ability to move forward. I think that's an important note in the survey, that while the folks are, in fact, realistic, perhaps empirically speaking, pessimistic, but they're yet hopeful about what could be done based upon what has been done. And so I think that that's a good point to look up about New Jersey.
When you listen to this guy speak, you won't be surprised that he's also a preacher. Cornell knows how to put a sentence in a paragraph and a message together. I want to do a quick buzzer round. I'll start with John in a minute. Just real quick, because we promised you all would be out of here by around 11:30. We got about 5 or 6 minutes to go. What's the one magic wand, if you had a magic wand in your hand and you could wave it at the middle class in New Jersey to meaningfully improve its circumstances, what might that be? But before I ask that question, again, I'll start with John. 2 quick comments on my left. First of all, Carl, in your case, you and I talk a lot about developing an ecosystem. And that's another reason why we're at NJIT. The notion that really came up in our 2 hours, Joel, together. The notion that New Jersey was Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley was Silicon Valley. And we shouldn't forget that. You had the Sarnoff Labs, you had the Bell Labs, you've got universities here. And this whole notion of creating that ecosystem. I know you've had a prior version of that life with somebody in the audience here today, and I know you wanted to say that.
Well, I want to mention, thank you, I want to mention a couple of things. First of all, Governor Kane here, when he was governor, created the Commission on Science and Technology. What he did there was, but it is an example of a partnership between business, government, and our both federal and state, moving the economy forward with high-quality jobs. And not all of those investments paid off, but many of them did, including ones at NJIT. And it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it took vision to make it happen. And so we should always thank Governor Kane for that and the kind of perspective that he had when he was sitting in the chair. We also have Congressman Holt here, who founded the idea of Einstein's Atlas to greater connect federal government, and of course he also worked at the Worcester Plasma Lab at a great research institution, to understand that up the Route 1 corridor we have 2 great research universities, and we keep going a little bit further. We have NJIT also. And as Dr. Bloom said, we have the greatest concentration of scientists in the United States, in this state. So we need to build more on that in partnership. And that's part of the tripartite relationship that's really necessary to move the economy forward.
Here. I should say that we launched a website this morning. I'd love you all to visit it. It's nsnj.org. It's buried down here, but I think it's in all the materials. I hope you get a chance to visit soon and often. We've put a whole series of podcasts, as they say in Hollywood, in the can on some of the neat ideas that we're looking at. So please visit us, which allows me to pivot to NERA, because what we're also going to do, in addition to having hopefully a vibrant website, we'd also like to, one of our missions is to keep our hand on the pulse of the middle class in the state. That's our hope, that this is a place you go to if you wanted to get a better sense, better texture on a complicated question as to what's going on in the middle class, that this is an organization that you can find those answers to. I don't know if Tim said this, but one of our other steps forward, I just want to reiterate that, is we're going to do symposium from time to time. Although we have to come up with a less Latin-based word than symposium, which sounds very frightening, at least to me. And our first one is coming up with the Center for American Progress. The date again?
21st of
January 21st. You did mention this, right? You did. Thanks to Mira and her good offices. It's going to be at the Hildreth Center at Rutgers. Joel, we're going to invite you to come over, cross over to New Brunswick. And you all have done a lot. You know, the middle class family study you've done at the national level. Our notion is to take the great work they've done nationally and marry it with some real specific New Jersey sense and get a 1 + 1 = 3 result. How's that sound?
Sounds great. I would just say quickly on that, I think that when we think about the middle class Bs and these trends, and you mentioned them before, the workforce is changing. There are forces like technology, globalization that are creating a lot of pressure on wages, unfortunately, often downwards. But what I think is really important about what you're doing here and what we're trying to do at the national level, and also when you look at other countries, sometimes we just throw up our hands because there are these trends in the world, and it's almost like they're too much to deal with. But you look at what other states are doing, what other countries are doing, they're navigating these trends much better. So there are ways in which you can invest in people, you can invest in education, you can give people the resources, you can have a public-private partnership to ensure that you are, taking advantage of technological change to create high-wage jobs. But there are solutions that other states, other countries are coming to ensure that middle-class wages grow. And that's what's so exciting about this partnership, about the work that you're doing, which is to really bring those ideas, because I think when policymakers feel like, when they have the attitude that this is the cusp of economic growth, it's not something you do on the side. It's where we really need to focus our efforts to improve the lives of the public, but also for economic growth over the long term. We can actually make sure that we are actually improving the lives of the public. It's not just that there are trends out there we can't do anything about. We can actually solve these challenges.
Just a huge amen to that, not only around the state, but around the country, even to a certain extent around the world. Germany, where I know a lot, has got an extraordinarily successful apprenticeship training model, where you've got side-by-side going to school and being a real apprentice. And these are jobs that pay well, high-wage jobs, value-added. Joel, both in the low-tech and the high-tech spheres, and people making a really good living out of it. So, magic wand to close. John, if you could wave a magic wand to meaningfully move the needle in the middle class, what is it?
Well, the obvious increase in wages, but I also think that one thing that's important here in New Jersey is we live in a shadow of the media markets we're caught between New York and Philadelphia. So sitting up here with you today and with everybody, these esteemed guests, the messaging, I'd love to see messaging get out, because there are a lot of people that are commoners like myself who decide that we could make a difference. Sometimes it's getting the message out because so many others would also like to participate in these things that would move the needle forward for all of New Jerseyans. Messaging is really important.
And I was saying, I was born in Boston and grew up outside of Boston. Boston is 180 degrees away. 90% of the state's population lives within Route 128. There's one media market. You go to one place, and it's a very fair point. It's not easy to get the word out or around, spread as a result of that. Again, it's great having you. Cornell, how about yourself? Magic wand.
Magic wand. First of all, I would start with the assumption that New Jersey has tremendous assets. I think that's important to state. Two, think about deepening demand. And what I mean by that is the demand for high-wage jobs. The fact that we're here at NJIT, the fact that we are in a city filled with universities where 1/5 of the daytime population are students. Leverage our anchor institutions, those being predominant, preeminently our universities. And the point being is leverage procurement, leverage employment. We look at Cleveland, the Greater University Circle Initiative, where we have universities bundling procurement to stimulate demand, to stimulate growth in local communities. Very important. Number two, strengthen the supply of workers for high-wage jobs. When I was at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, it was extraordinarily heartening to work with legislators like Bonnie Watson Coleman and the labor unions to put 450 people into high-wage work. These were folks who oftentimes were written off, and now they're members of the middle class. So the point being is, to the extent we can tie workforce development to employers in real time, so that you're training people for jobs that really exist, where you have employers embedded in the curriculum. So in other words, they're driving how you're training the workers. And related to that, where you focus on hard skills as well as soft skills. Because most employers will tell you, we need people who are technically proficient, who will also have the will to work, and will work well in the workplace. That would be my magic wand, and thank you for helping me with it.
You're the best, buddy. It's so good to have you. Anna?
Well, I think as we look at all these important issues, you have to look at how women fare in them. And if you lift women, you lift children. So many of our families are headed by single female heads of households, certainly that we serve. 70% of them are living below the line, barely making ends meet. Lift them up, you lift up children, and you lift up children, that's our future. So I think that's what we need to look at.
What a powerful statement. Again, great.
If I had two magic wands.
Oh, Carl. Same amount of time. You have to pay.
The first I would have would be to focus our educational institutions, not just on educational preparation, but on completion and preparation for the world of work. And I said as a university professor, I mean, we are interested, of course, in raising their sights and lifting their hearts about the great ideas of the world, but we also have to prepare people for work. And understand that part of that is doing a much better job at the high school level with career and technical education and apprenticeships and cooperative education, other ways to directly connect young people with the world of work and give them the opportunity to learn and earn at the same time. My second magic wand is to deal with people in the workforce who need to transition from one job to another. We need to shift from an unemployment insurance system to a reemployment insurance system. To give people the opportunity to learn new skills when they need it, to learn how to look for a job. I deal with a lot of older workers, and I'm one of them, who don't know anything about the social media. They don't understand that's the way people find jobs today.
Based on what we see through our kids' eyes, it's best that way, Carl. Stay out of trouble.
Well, when some websites only use social media to recruit, your kids are advantaged, right? So we need to help older workers, and when I say older, I mean people in their prime working years who are experienced. So transition for the unemployed into good jobs and preparation for younger people to get a job.
I associate those both as hallmarks of your work. Great to have you. Nira, I mentioned Cornell came from the train station. You're going to close us out because you're going to the train station. What do you got?
It's hard as a thinking president to just focus on one, but I'll just do one, which is making college more affordable. So I would say that has multiple effects. First of all, middle class folks feel really squeezed and very anxious about the cost of college because the cost of college has gone up dramatically over the last 12 years. At the same time, having a college degree has become more important than ever in ensuring higher wages for folks. So it's almost an unfortunate fact that college is a real bifurcation in the economy. And particularly in a high knowledge state like New Jersey, that's a big asset that there's so many people here with college degrees. At the same time, it is a looming burden for families. So if I had one proposal that at the state level you could really do something about, it would be making college affordable for more people so that people in the middle class and those striving to get into the middle class have real access to that
I love
opportunity.
it. I love it. It's consistent with some of the work we're doing. We're looking at, in my mentioned goal, looking at making community college either at a minimum more accessible, in a perfect world, free, where some states do it. I started today where I want to end, and that was the Berlin Wall. So as down as some of this data is, as down as we all feel in our bones some days, the fact of the matter is even stuff that's cement and high and thick that stuff is not permanent, and history has proven that. We can collectively move the needle. As I said, we're gonna be a glass, we'll be data-driven, so we're gonna be Moneyball at one level, but we're gonna be glass half full. And we welcome any ideas from anywhere in New Jersey or around the country. Again, it's a great honor for Tammy and me and Tim to be with you all today. Again, I thank Carl, Mira, John, Cornell, and Anna. Thank you all for coming.